is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Jonas of The Lurking Fear, as well as At the Gates, Bombs of Hades, God Macabre, and so many other bands. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. No problem.
Yeah, you have a very, very impressive resume, so it's always great to be able to talk music with you. But we finally got a brand new Lurking Fear album, Death, Madness, Horror, and Decay. Was the intention behind this album just to make a direct continuation of Out of the Voiceless Grave, or or were you kind of stepping into uncharted territory with this Lurking Fear album?
Uh, we didn't really think about trying to make it sound like the first album. Quite the opposite, actually. I think, and because the writing just was different on this one than the first one, because we took a bit more time writing this album than the first one.
Mhm.
So I think the arrangements were a bit more worked on and stuff like that. So I think it's a lot more cohesive album than the first one.
Yeah, like more. I couldn't agree with you more because when I listened to the album and when you go from like Abysmal Slime to the title track and Funeral Abyss to the final track Restless Death, it almost seems like that there is a consistent element behind it. It's just pedal to the metal all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, it still needs some downtime in it, some more heavy stuff, because I mean, I would prefer that always, just listen to an album that's just full throttle all the time. It's just not really fun in the end, I think.
Yeah. Are we gonna get any gentle love ballads from the Lurking Fear anytime soon?
I don't think so, but I mean, there's always gonna be, I mean, some like clean guitar parts or whatever and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I think it's just gonna be heavy and pretty brutal stuff all the time.
Definitely, definitely. What and was that like a preconceived idea behind Death, Madness, Horror, and Decay, or was there maybe like a lot of improvising and a lot of experimentation involved as well?
No, not really. I mean, I mean, we wrote the album kind of in bulks this time because I mean we had like two or three songs ready, and then it took a few months before we had two, three more and stuff like that. So it wasn't until we probably were like halfway through the writing, we kind of realized that the how we wanted the album to be. And then so I mean, since we're three different songwriters and we write in a different way, all three of us. But at the same time, on this one, we actually collaborated a lot more. I mean, on the first album, it's just like I wrote a bunch of songs, and Andreas wrote a bunch of songs, and Fred wrote one song only on the first album. But on this one, he wrote a little bit more, and both me and Fred wrote together, and Fred and Andreas also. So I think that also makes the album a bit different.
Yeah. Well, being that the Lurking Fear is like a super group, I call it the ultimate Swedish compilation in a way. Like, was it the intention to combine elements of At the Gates and to combine elements of like Bombs of Hades and Lockup and so many other bands? Were you like trying to combine aspects of different projects into one, or were you all trying to step into uncharted territory that you wouldn't do in At the Gates or other projects?
I mean, I don't think any of us like had any preconceived ideas about, because I'm in that band, I will bring that into it. It's just I write songs the way I write songs, and I don't never try to mold it after whatever I'm doing. It's just always it depends on what kind of music it is. But when it comes to death metal, it's I write the way I write always. The only difference is I mean, working with Bombs for Hades and Lurking Fear, the difference between it is maybe I can do a bit more uh, different, more difficult stuff for the drums. Because I mean, Magnus is a great drummer in Bones of Hades, but he's not as technical as Adrian is. So I can that because that's a nice thing. I can always challenge Adrian with like weird stuff. So and he always pulls it off. So
Yeah.
which is nice because I always write with drums in my head when I write riffs and stuff. So
You think from a very rhythmic standpoint. In a way, did you start off
yeah,
as a drummer or as a
always,
bassist?
always. Yeah, and sometimes my rhythms are really weird because I've heard that from different drummers. I was like, that's like, well, I'm not thinking in a straight rhythm here. It's just weird, you know. So
Yeah. What
I mean, they hold, and I mean, none of us bring our other bands into it really. It's just the five of us together, and that's how it sounds. You know, it would sound different if someone else was in the band instead of Andreas or Fred or Thomas or whatever. It would be a different band. You know, it's the five of us that makes it sound the way it sounds.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. And but does maybe experimenting with the lurking fear maybe open up new ideas of what you could bring into other projects, or do you try to keep everything as separate as possible?
No, it's not hard to keep it separate either. I mean, sometimes you come up with a riff and like then it's like, oh, maybe that's better for this thing, and or other than that thing, you know. So that's the only kind of time you think about stuff like that. But usually, when I sit down and I write for Lurking Fear, and I just simply just write for Lurking Fear this time when I'm writing now. So that's kind of how I work.
Yeah. And, as artists, our instruments are ways of expression and our ways of expressing our emotions and our persons
Yeah.
and whatnot. Do you almost feel that maybe every project is almost a different identity behind who you personally are in a way?
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, none of the bands I play in sound the same. It's every band has got their own identity, which is something I really like. Because I mean, sometimes there's guys who start projects here and there. I don't consider anything I have a project. Everything is a real band, you know. And some people just start like 10 different projects that all sound the same,
Yeah.
and I just they work with different people and maybe different singers, but in the end, it just sounds exactly the same, and I don't see any point in that. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Might as well just play
I
in one
play with
band.
I play with other musicians to like evolve and to find. I mean, this it's always different playing with those guys or those guys. It's a completely different entity. So, which is very like educating as a musician, I think.
Yeah. What side could we be seeing of who you personally are in the Lurking Fear, as opposed to maybe what we haven't seen in Bombs of Hades or At the Gates? Because I believe I interviewed you at like the beginning of the pandemic for Bombs of Hades, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was wondering like what could we be seeing differently in the Lurking Fear? Like what are you expressing mainly?
I mean, there's a. I've kind of been quite bored with writing death metal the past few years, and I just came to it just came to a point where like, how many more Slayer kind of riffs do I really want to write? But I mean, at the same time, it's like, I mean, the next Bombs of Hades album is musically not going to be a death metal album at all. You know, it's going to be heavy, really heavy, but it's not going to be death metal. So it's not going to be any of those like Slayer riffs or crust punk riffs or anything like that. It's just going to be full on heavy and a bit weird.
Yeah.
And whilst in Lurking Fear, as I said before, you know, it's fun to write Slayer riffs like for Adrian when he's playing drums, you know. So, but I actually try to do more of the heavy Slayer actually when Hanneman wrote those amazing more heavy songs like Seasons in the Abyss and Dead Skin Mask and stuff like that. That's really the Slayer that I really enjoy the most.
Yeah. Well,
So,
the term heavy is such a loose term nowadays. Like I remember talking
yeah,
to somebody who isn't metal at all, and like they asked me, "Oh, is the music you listen to heavy like Stained or Creed?" Like they would think Creed is like devil music, you know? So
yeah.
I think like in the end, and just because and also the vice versa, just because it's heavy doesn't necessarily mean it's thrash metal or death metal. It could be heavy with its subject matter or its emotion that's expressed
Yeah.
into it.
I mean, I consider bands like Sleep or whatever heavy, and even though I mean stuff like Anna von Housewolf, who's like, uh, I mean, you could. you couldn't really put her in the metal category, but I think she's more metal than so much other stuff that's out there, you know. So that's considered metal, you know, because
Yeah,
the stuff she does is so dark and artsy and stuff, and it's so heavy, especially live, you know. So
yeah.
that's the perception I have of heavy, you know. So
Yeah, I think it reflects a sound. It could reflect an image. It could reflect a concept.
yeah,
I think heavy is not. It has way more than just one meaning.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, and bands like Mogwai, they're heavier than most bands, really, when they actually do their really distorted, slow stuff, you know.
Yeah. Hey, my favorite pop band, which is from Sweden, Kent. I mean, they're heavy compared to the most pop music that's here in America. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kent was they were a great band, and they were a dark band too, you know, and which is like it's kind of nice that a band like that got so huge in Sweden. You know,
yeah,
it's a shame they never did it outside of Sweden, really,
I
or
know.
outside of Scandinavia.
Yeah, like I've
Yeah.
interviewed so many bands from Sweden, like probably more than any other country, and everybody in Sweden knows who Kent is. But the second I interview a band from Norway or Finland, they're like, "Who's that? Is that like a death metal band?" I'm like, "No." So,
Well, I think they were pretty big in Finland actually, because half the band were Finnish,
oh, really?
so with Finnish roots. So I think they were quite big in Finland actually, but.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, that explains where the
And I think
folky
I'm
riffs
more
come
all
from.
over Scandinavia, but I mean, especially in Sweden, they were like really huge. And I mean, they did one album in English, third album, and try to make it outside of Sweden, but it didn't work at all, you know.
Yeah, there's
And then,
some.
I mean, then a couple of years later, a band like Dungen comes along and breaks in America singing in Swedish, which is like weird.
Yeah, it's ironic. There's some bands that like should not sing in English. Like I would never want Rammstein to sing an English song. There's some songs that they do sing in English and they're usually end up being deep cuts. Or a band like Duran Gray that only sings in Japanese. Like there's some
Yeah.
bands that should sing in there. Have you ever thought about writing an album that's completely sung in Swedish?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think the Swedish language is very few gets away with it. I think Opeth really got away with it on the last record,
Yeah.
and I mean, I told Michael like I think the everything just came across a lot better when you sing in Swedish. You know, oh,
Yeah.
I might never do it again. He said.
Well, Opeth gets away with everything, and especially with 27-minute long songs. I just saw Opeth this past Saturday with Mastodon,
Hey,
and I was a half
yeah.
hour late for their set. I was a half hour late for their set, and I made it before the first song ended.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean, how was the new drummer they
oh,
had on that?
really good. He pulled the parts off great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's good to hear.
yeah, I never really like there, and a lot of drum nerds are gonna kill me for saying this, but when it came to Opeth for me, I was always gravitating towards the melody and Michael Ackerfeld's voice. So like I never gave the rhythm section too much analysis, but when they played live, I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always got shit because I don't like Lopez drumming, you know. So.
Uh,
I
everybody,
mean, he's a great drummer, he is, but I think he's just too fiddly with the small splashes and stuff. And Axe is a lot heavier as a drummer. He's
I worked.
so I mean, Axe was like when he started playing with them, I was like, oh yeah, because I didn't really like Opeth before that. This is I kind of like went backwards after Watershed, you know, and everyone's talking about Blackwater Park, and it's definitely not my favorite album
I
of
think that
them.
they've. I think that they've exceeded Black. I love Blackwater Park, but I mean,
Yeah,
have you ever listened to Still Life? Like, I mean, that's a phenomenal album, and when you go
yeah,
beyond,
yeah. I mean, I like those records now, but for me, it's still my two favorite records with them is Watershed and the last one. So
really, that's interesting. Like their recent two albums are great, but I tend to like gravitate towards like middle career Opeth in a way.
yeah,
Like but it's funny that you mentioned splash cymbals because I've worked in musical gear my whole life. That's my family business. What the fuck is the point of a splash cymbal?
I know. Yeah, I mean, it works very rarely, I think.
Yeah, it's like a
So, I
nine
mean,
string guitar.
Neil Peart got away with it because he used it in a very like nice way, you know.
Yeah.
but he had taste always with what he was doing,
Fair enough.
and I think it's especially metal. I think it just doesn't like belong there. It's too like I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
just I want more like I like big cymbals.
Yeah,
So,
a splash cymbal is what would sound like if you strangled a cymbal to death.
yeah,
But
I mean, my son is a drummer, and I told him when he started playing now, which is like 15 years ago. It, I was like, never get a splash cymbal. I'll fucking disown you.
fair enough.
No, I didn't say that, but I mean, he's really into like heavy drummers and very like tiny kits and just like huge ass cymbals. That's what he's into. So
Yeah, to each their own. I don't understand how a drummer could be so picky with, having its same purpose. But for your guitar
yeah.
work, do you ever approach it from a theoretical standpoint? Are you thinking about scale or key or form, or are you completely
Never.
self-taught?
I mean, I can think about keys and stuff when I write, but otherwise, I mean, scales is. I stopped practicing like scales when I was like 17 or something because I got more into songwriting. I thought that was much more fun than being the fastest guitar player. And the guitar players I like are really just field players and slower players like David Gilmour and stuff like that. That's what I'm into. So
Yeah. I think I don't care how much you could shred. I think a good song is what matters the most. And I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, I
there,
mean,
there are plenty of songs I'm sure you and I could both think of that have great guitar solos, but the song itself is mediocre.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and I think a guitar solo should serve the song, not the just for the sake of a guitar solo.
Yeah,
So
I like there's some guitar players where I like want to ask them, so do you get paid by the note or how does it work?
yeah, yeah,
Do you is the tuning though actually the same for all your projects? Like at the gates lurking like is it almost kind of like a similar tuning or do you maybe like
Then the first Lucky Fear album was in D standard because I always played D standard in Bones of Hades and with God Macabre, and I also played in Electric Hydra, which is more of a stoner hard rock band that I also play in. That's more we use D standard mostly, but also some drop C and stuff. And but we thought for the new Lurking Fear album, we thought just do it in B, that like it was supposed to do. To be. So and it's. I mean, I think that's also key why the album sounds so different than the first one is because it's and I played my baritone guitar that I play in At the Gates because At the Gates also do B standard and then I mean God Macabre and Bones of Hades is still D standard, but actually a lot of the stuff on the next Bombs record is in B also, and just two songs really, but and then the Venus Principle, one of my new bands, which is more prog kind of stuff, is just normal standard tuning and also some weird open tuning some songs.
Yeah, I've always heard like a lot of guitar players say that they maybe adjust the tuning depending on who's singing in the band. Is that at all like taken into account?
I mean, not really when it comes to death metal. I think
Yeah.
that's more of a thing. I think for I mean more clean singers, especially when they get older and they like their range is different. I think. I mean, I always try for Sanne who sings in Electric Hydra. Sometimes it's like, oh, maybe we should do this one in B because it suits your voice better for this song or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's different. I think it's mostly for clean vocals that applies to.
Yeah, because in cattle decapitation, they tune in they're standard the whole time. So like
Yeah,
I think in death metal they're like a lot some people unfortunately think that like if you're in a death metal band you have to tune as low as possible. There are like some
yeah,
guitar players I've seen with like a 27 string guitar and then like
yeah.
and they're tuning it down to like drop minor or whatever the hell and I'm like
Yeah.
but
I don't know what tune Morbid Angel used on the first records. I mean, it sounds like it's standard on the first record at least. I actually never I just thought of that now. Actually, I got curious about it because I never like looked into it.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean, I mean, principle. I mean, and you don't really. You can still make normal standing tuning sound heavy as fuck, you know. So
Absolutely.
it
I mean,
depends on how you play it and how you stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, rock and roll was founded on that tuning. So, think about it.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
before we go, it's great to be able to talk technical stuff. I never get the opportunity. And guitar nerds, drop in the comments if you could think of any bands that have standard tuning. But before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and great to talk with you again. I feel like I've interviewed you for every project now, so I'm trying to check. I'm trying to check it off the list. So, is there just anything else with the Lurking Fear that you'd like to promote? I mean, can we be expecting maybe to see you take the Lurking Fear out on the road? Can we maybe do like a double duty tour? Or no, can you ever do a tour where you bring out all your bands? Bring out At the Gates, The Lurking Fear, Bombs of Hades, God Macabre? Like just.
We joked about bringing out like just going from At the Gates standpoint, you can bring out so many, or At the Gates and Lurking Fear, you can bring like Skid System and Haunted and Lurking Fear and At the Gates and Agrimonia and whatever. There's so many bands. We can just do this. It would probably be a festival in the end, you know, with
Yeah.
all the bands we play in. Or
Yeah, you should have your own festival though. You should actually like have At the Gates, Bombs of Hades, God Macabre, The Lurking Fear. Bring in like reunite with some of your old bands. Bring back Dark Creed and Utumno and Carnal Redemption and all those bands, and just make it your own
I mean,
festival.
I actually that's a funny thing you mentioned Dark Creed. I was actually never a member of Dark Creed, but it's
Really?
uh, I just did one solo for the band, you know. So
Really?
I mean, I know Andres really well, but I was never a member of Dark Creed. So
So bring them on the
it's
bill
kind
to
of
bring them on the
it
bill to play
always
that
said
one solo.
archives that I'm a member of Dark Creed. I was like, no, I was never a member of Dark Creed.
Well, maybe you could bring them out on that festival just to play that one solo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But the Jonas Festival, think about it.
Well,
Um,
there's already a festival called Steel Fest, so.
yeah, fair enough. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Jonas of The Lurking Fear. Be sure to check out the brand new album, Death, Madness, Horror, and Decay. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.